Again, something else that kind of is probably obvious, but I wanted to give a bit of attention to, especially in the wake of vaping. So tobacco smoke is still responsible for 150,000 premature deaths annually in the US. And still 1 in 10 cardiovascular deaths around the world can be attributed to smoking. Um, it leads or contributes to about a third of all deaths in the United States related to cardiovascular disease and 20% of the deaths from ischemic heart disease, so blockage of the heart blood vessels. In addition, um, for some reason, women seem to be more susceptible to all of these risks. So, uh, tobacco smoke seems to harm women more than men. And along with, for example, impaired sleep, you also see an increased risk for irregular rhythms. We also see an increased risk for diabetes or glucose intolerance, lower levels of the HDL cholesterol, which is sort of like the good cholesterol. I like to think of it as the happy cholesterol. So H is for happy. That's a good way to remember it. And tobacco has multiplicative effects with other cardiovascular risk factors, such as high cholesterol and diabetes itself. Some harmful components of cigarette smoke, obviously nicotine is the primary source, but there's also carbon monoxide, oxidant gases, and other toxins such as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, particulate matter, and heavy metals of various sorts, such as cadmium. And the mechanism of harm appears to be the induction of atherosclerotic changes or changes that increase the risk of plaque formation, increased oxygen demand, endothelial damage, an induction of the hypercoagulable state, or a state of increased clotting risk, and catecholamine activation, or an increased risk of sort of that fight or flight response. And so here you can kind of see a theme that the mechanisms of harm to the heart are very similar to, for example, COVID or even sleep deprivation. So, and again, a word about vaping here. Similar to tobacco smoke, e-cigarettes are associated with increased risk for high blood pressure, endothelial dysfunction, and decreased vessel elasticity, as well as plaque formation or atherosclerosis. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but EVALI was sort of this lung injury condition that was sort of discovered in 2019. And it was linked to products containing THC that were being vaped. Essentially, they found direct chemical burns, which led to sort of permanent lung damage. And 30% of the cases that presented to hospitals required mechanical ventilation or ventilator support. And you can imagine that in the setting of a COVID infection would be doubly troublesome. And so when we look at tobacco's impact on COVID risks, there is an increased risk. And we think that increased risk occurs through the upregulation of these ACE2 receptors that you may have heard about. And interestingly, in adolescents and young adults who might otherwise be at low risk for severe COVID, we have seen that vaping increases the risk of COVID diagnosis by 5 times. And when they also smoke cigarettes, the increased risk, the risk goes to 7 times, which is quite a lot.